Evaluate the following given the definition of h of x to the right. So h of x here are all these pieces of the piecewise equation. And when we evaluate the following here, the one thing to keep in mind is that you only get one answer. So when we look at this, we have to find the right piece to use to get our answer. And as we take a look at the letter A, h of -7, the part that we're looking at to determine what to use is this stuff that I just circled right there. The domain is what it is. And the first part is x is between -9 and -1, including -1. The second piece is x is between -1 and 3. And the third piece is x is greater than or equal to 3. So when we look over here at h of 7, this is h of x. So we're looking to see where is -7? Well, is -7 between -9 and -1, including -1? Yes. And the nice part about this is that there is no value of x in the actual function part, which is the 8. And h of -7 is 8. If that's confusing, what we did in our notes is we wrote it as 8 plus 0x. So we would put -7 back into our function for x, but 0 times -7 is still 0, and 8 plus 0 is 8. That'll show up again here in a couple minutes on at least one more of these, so you'll see it again if it doesn't make sense yet. H of 1. Again, we go over here to what's circled in blue, and is 1 between -9 and -1, including -1? No. It is 1 in between -1 and 3. And yes, it is. So the function that we're going to use on this one, I'm going to just write it out a little bit more, I didn't leave myself enough space, is -2x plus 4. What we're going to do is we're going to take that value of 1, we're going to put it back into the equation wherever we see x, and we end up with -2 times 1 plus 4. -2 times 1 is -2 plus 4, and -2 plus 4 is 2. So h of 1 is 2. Again, notice one answer. Letter C, h of 0. We need to pick which piece to use. Well, is 0 between -9 and -1, including -1? No. Is it between -1 and 3? And yes, it is. So our function, once again, that we're going to use is the -2x plus 4. And I'm going to write down below here. I know we can't see it, but I'll modify here in a minute. We're going to take this value of 0 and we're going to put it back into our function wherever we see x. So this becomes -2 times 0 plus 4. And -2 times 0 is 0 plus 4. And 0 plus 4 is 4. So that was letter C. So here's B in green. C is mostly in red. Let's look at letter D, which is h of 10. I'll write it again here, h of 10. And we need to determine which piece to use. And 10 is not between -9 and -1, even whether -1 is included or not. Those are all negatives. 10 is not between -1 and 3. 10 is greater than or equal to 3, our third piece this time. So when we calculate out this value, what we're going to use is that function of x minus 10. We go back to the x minus 10, which is beside the x is greater than or equal to 3. We're going to take that value of 10 going to put it back into the equation wherever we see x. So we get 10 minus 10, and 10 minus 10 equals 0. Two more in terms of this function. The next one is h of -1. And we need to look and decide which piece to use. And on this one, when we're looking at it here, is -1, are we going to use the less than or equal to, which is the first piece, or just the less than on the second piece? We need to use the less than or equal to on this particular one. So h of -1, we're using this function there, using this one. -1 is x is less than or equal to -1. So when we go back to put something in, we don't have any x to put it back in. We simply end up with the value there, which is 8. And then the last value, letter f, which is h of 3. I'm running out of space here. I'm wondering if I can write it above. But h of 3, well, 3 is not between -9 and -1. And it actually isn't between -1 and 3, because on that second piece there's no equals with the 3. So it falls into our last category here of the x's greater than or equal to 3. Our function is x minus 10, and we're going to take that value of 3, we're going to put it back into our function wherever we see x. So we're going to put that 3 minus 10. I messed up in terms of colors here. The 3 minus 10 equals -7. So now let's go ahead and graph this function. And the thing is, I do have a chart over there for you to fill in, but I think it needs one more box. And you may need to add another box when you're working or taking the quiz as well, so don't be afraid to do that. We have 3 pieces here, so when we draw our graph here, we're going to have a break here, and we're going to have a break here. I'm not going to fill in the whole box because I need at least that many. I need 6 squares here to go through this process. And when we start, the endpoints of our domain, the -9 and the -1, are what we're going to use to help us draw a segment. And it is going to be a segment because there's a starting point and an ending point. On our second piece, the middle piece here, we're going to use the values -1 and 3. And on our last piece, we're going to use 3 and something greater than or equal to 3, greater than 3. I recommend that you don't use 4. Pick something so it's spread out a little bit, like maybe 6. And you can pick 4, it's just it's really close together and then you can't tell which direction to go. That's the only reason why I picked something a little away from 3. And once we pick that, we're doing the evaluation just like we did on that last problem. When we put -9 back into our first piece, we get out 8. When we put -1 back into our first piece, we get out an 8. On the next functions here, I'm going to write over here on my grid, but you might want to write over here in this space somewhere, just so that you've got space to graph it in a couple minutes. But on this particular one, what we're going to do is we're going to take negative 1, and I actually think I can fit it over here. Put it back into the function wherever we see x. So negative 2 times 1 plus 4. Type it in your calculator if you have to. Negative 2 times 1 plus 4 is 2. Putting negative 3 back into that middle piece. It's negative 2 times 3 plus 4. Well, negative 2 times 3 is negative 6 plus 4, which gives us negative 2. And then we're going to go through that process one more time with our remaining two values, which is 3. We're going to put that into our third piece. So it's going to be 3 minus 10, which is negative 7. And we're going to put the 6 in, or whatever you picked for that, which is 6 minus 10, which is negative 4. One little fix. It really should have been 2 times negative 1 plus 4. So 2 times negative 1 is positive 2 plus 4, which is 6. Let's draw the picture. And before we draw the picture, we better put in what kind of circle are we going to have on our first value? Well, negative 9 is less than x. There's no equals. We're going to have an open circle on that one. But then it says x is less than or equal to negative 1. That's going to have a filled-in circle. When we go to the green values, well, both of those, negative 1 less than x, less than 3. Neither one of them has an equals. It's going to be an open circle and an open circle. And then down here on the red, x is greater than or equal to is going to be a solid circle. And this is just a point in between. Our red values are going to be part of our array. So we need the starting point, and then we just need to figure out the direction that our array is going to be continuing on forever in. And we draw the picture. Negative 9, 8. And that needs to be an open circle. Negative 1, 8. And here's our first piece. Our second piece. Negative 1, 6. Open circle. There on the 6. 3, negative 2. Still an open circle. Here's our second piece. Our third piece, 3, negative 7, and it's a solid circle. And then 6, negative 4, still a solid circle. But we need to recognize that x is greater than or equal to 3. Means that we've got our starting point at the 3, and then we're going to continue on in that direction. We're not going to stop when we get to that next value. It's an array. We only have a starting point for that third piece. We picked an extra value to be able to draw it. But here we get our picture of our function.